Today the academy would finally end. It was the last day before graduation, well assuming that you pass that is, but the young blonde boy definitely wasn't going to fail, he's the strongest after all. Uzumaki Naruto was that boy in question. The 12-year-old had yellowish blonde hair that fell freely down with an undercut style allowing the fringe to just reach to his eyes. He wore a standard set of clothes with seemingly black cargo pants that had a blue tint to them tied at his shins with tape and standard shinobi sandals. His shirt was also a standard blue long sleeve, pulled up and tied at his mid-wrist, with a red spiral on each shoulder and the middle of his upper back. As well as a few pouches tied to his waist, he stood at an impressive height of 5 feet 1 and with a good athletic build. Okay boys, show the unison sign. A chunin with a spiky ponytail and scar across his nose spoke to Naruto and his opponent-to-be. Uchiha Sasuke. Had it tough, Naruto thought. He was a talented child, there's no doubt about that, but he had been both outmatched and spat on during his life. He had lost his family when his elder brother supposedly went mad and slaughtered them all to test his capabilities, leaving only Sasuke alive. He claimed that Sasuke was nothing. Unlike Itachi, who had been born to be great with almost unrivaled talent, he was barely better than average and was so entirely unfulfilling that he wasn't even worth killing. The village claimed to have been unable to catch Itachi and he escaped after the massacre, leaving Sasuke to swear vengeance, vowing to end his brother's life with his own hands to avenge his family. Naruto doubted some of that, though in fairness he also thought that the top people in the village, being the elders, clan heads and even the Hokage, were cowards, so maybe he was a little biased. Naruto's distaste for such people aside, Sasuke's survival felt weird. In any case, Naruto thought highly of Sasuke. His potential was great, he could literally see it after all, but his will and spirit, clouded with rage and hate they may be, were still unmatched. So of course, when set to fight him, oh, we get to fight Sasuke. How excited are you to face yours truly? Naruto said with his voice high and playful at first, then swapping to self-reverent and cocky for the last part, while leaning his face forward and giving a grin. Yep, Naruto definitely liked Sasuke. HN, was the ever so eloquent reply to his joyful boasting. Ah, if only you had activated those pretty red eyes of yours, then I would have claimed it to be fate. Naruto continued, ignoring the twitch in Sasuke's eye. Well, sadly mine don't turn off, or on actually, so I'm afraid I'll have an unfair advantage. Wait, I know, I'll just close my eyes, it's not like I need to see to beat you anyway. This time Naruto's tone held a playful mocking in it, hoping to annoy Sasuke with his comments. Which they did, but did not distract him from his observation. Sasuke stared at Naruto, more specifically his eyes. They were a light blue color and seemed to almost look as if they were reflecting the sky. They had a slight glow to them that just screamed power. They were beautiful, and horribly uncomfortable to look at. It felt like they were peering past and into you, breaking you apart and seeing everything about you. They stared into your soul and invaded your deepest, most sacred place within your mind, all without even trying. They were the Six Eyes. A dojutsu totally unique to Naruto, with no past holders ever being spoken of. Even the Hokage had never seen them before, they were a mystery. And with their mysterious origins came unknown powers. Only Naruto knew what they did, and even that was being generous. He didn't know as much as just understood. That was the only thing he had revealed about them, their natural ability to see and understand chakra beyond any other sensory ability or dojutsu in the world. To see it at a deeper level than even believed possible, and to then naturally know and understand its place and interaction with the world. Naruto's eyes were, despite their beauty, a divisive thing within the village. Some believed they were nothing special, a parlor trick used by an orphan boy with a god complex hoping to have others believe in and revere his holy existence as much as he seemed to. Others were put off by them, likely having made the mistake of looking into them for too long and disliked and avoided Naruto because of them. But in Sasuke's opinion, the craziest ones were those who believed they were bestowed onto him by a demon in return for a contract or deal. They claimed he was the reason for the Nine Tails attack, that was coincidentally on his birthday, that he was cursed and that his eyes were proof of such. Sasuke never understood how people could claim Naruto made a binding vow with a demon for his eyes and had been born the same day, let alone be the curse that caused the Nine Tails attack. Surely, they recognized the idiocy in claiming a newborn not only had the intelligence to converse with a demon and enter into a two-way deal in exchange for fancy eyes while giving something away, but also, that while doing so inadvertently caused the king of the Biju to attack, leaving him with his cursed eyes as proof of his treachery to his people. In his opinion, they just didn't like Naruto. Quote, Sasuke, you there? Hello. Sensei, I think I've dazzled him with my beauty and he's unable to fight. Sasuke snapped back to reality from his wanderings at the sound of the voice. He noticed the girls of his class cheer his name, even the boys looked to be supporting him for once. Naruto's reputation certainly extended far. Iruka sighed at Naruto's antics and thanked the sage he'd be free after today. He loved Naruto, even tried to fill an empty role in the boy's life as an older brother to help guide and mature him, but gods, he was annoying. Thankfully, with Sasuke's return to the living, he could get this beatdown spar over with and finish up the last portion of the graduation exam. The written and ninjutsu tests had gone well. Most of his pupils seemed to have done well enough when he took a quick glance at their answers, and of course he had judged them on their ninjutsu proficiency personally, so he knew how they performed in that section. Now the last of the taijutsu exams was to take place between his two top students. Not that it truly mattered, seeing as both boys had already made it mathematically impossible to fail when considering the scores they achieved overall. Are both of you ready? After receiving a nod from Sasuke and a lazy hand wave from Naruto, who seems to have gone from excited and bubbly to bored and lethargic enough to pass for another of his students, Iruka began the spar. Then begin. Naruto stood with his eyes closed, hands in his pockets, and awaited the attack he knew would come after all his boasting. As he suspected, Sasuke rushed towards him, hoping to take the advantage through gathering momentum. Ducking under the sweeping right hook that came, Naruto spun around, now having swapped places with his adversary. Sasuke, having expected Naruto's dodge, was not caught off balance and used his momentum to lift his back left leg and go for a high kick whilst allowing it to turn him toward his opponent. Naruto dodged easily after quickly leaning his head back and allowing the leg to swoop past him. Naruto, not wanting to drag it out, decided to forego his usual approach to battle and get into it straight away. He engaged Sasuke after parrying a blow meant for his throat with the back of his hand. He threw his left hand to Sasuke's stomach, which stole the air from his opponent and allowed him to push harder at his defenses. He allowed Sasuke to show off his own skills at the same time, though not completely overwhelming him, and instead using the spar to try and help where he could in terms of gaining experience and showing any openings or faults within Sasuke's form. The boy, although talented, trained by himself, and so these were always helpful, and each time Sasuke came back having fixed what had been pointed out to him. Naruto loved teaching. Getting tired of the back and forth which he was on the losing end of, Sasuke made distance and regained his breath. Naruto usually fought quite reservedly, using your own power against you, until he got into it and began to show his overwhelming power. Considering his opponent seemed to want to jump right into it, Sasuke thought he better up the ante. He rejoined the fight, moving faster and with more fluidity than before. He brought his leg down in an axe kick which was blocked with Naruto's forearms. He had his leg pulled trying to escape and had to eat the close line to the chest that put him on his back, but he quickly rolled away from the stomp that would have ended the fight. Naruto smiled and beckoned Sasuke closer after he rose from the ground. He caught a left that was aimed for his nose and held the arm, not allowing Sasuke to escape. He used his free hand to pepper his opponent with blows and eventually wound up a kick that landed under the chin, lifting him off the ground. Before Sasuke could recover, his leg was grabbed again and Naruto threw him out of bounds, ending their spar. Though relatively short-lasting, the skill, speed and power on display was leagues ahead of anyone else. Naruto assumed that they had done enough and decided to just end it, despite both boys still being well able to continue. He recognized that this spar shouldn't be one fought to the bitter end. It was purely a demonstration of skill and the teachings you learned, not a genuine spar between shinobi hoping to train and better themselves for true mission combat. With the last spar complete, Naruto and his classmates were allowed to leave after being given instructions to return at the usual time tomorrow for their results and team placement. Making his way off the academy grounds, Naruto ignored his classmates' grumbling about his win over Sasuke and made his way home. He actually quite liked some of them, but also recognized that many were simply limiting themselves by solely learning from their clans, but he supposed heirs learning material from outside the clan would cause tension within the hierarchy of cowards who ran this place. They were people who started out normal but became corrupted by power and prestige. They were backstabbers who used the downfall and hardships of their friends to further their own position. Well, that was irrelevant to Naruto. He had known of such things since the discovery of his eyes. He had watched and listened as they debated and discussed what to do with him as if he was their property. Some voting for his death while others wished to take control of him and use him for their gain. But in the end, despite political positions, power dictates everything, and the Hokage had ruled he would be left alone. Truly, power was everything. If you were strong, the village would have need of you, and well, the name he would eventually create for himself was proof enough of this boy's strength. Naruto of the 6 eyes, the strongest. But for now, he was a boy awaiting his team and Jonin-sensei to be revealed so he could continue his path. Naruto sat alone in his apartment. The room was nice, not overly lavish or extravagant, but still better than what an average orphan would be accustomed to. The apartment consisted of a living space with a couch, coffee table and TV, along with some space for bookshelves and storage. Next to it was a kitchen separated only by a worktop that jutted out from the wall, with the side on the living room prepped with mats for eating and the kitchen side housing the oven and fridge. Lastly, his bedroom was nice, large enough to hold a double bed with a wardrobe for clothes and even a place for study. Naruto disliked it though. All this apartment did was prove to him that strength was all these villages cared for. He was strong and so he was treated well. Those other orphans who were weak, well, they certainly weren't enjoying such luxuries. Those in power are always afraid to lose it, to become normal again. They paved the way for those who were strong to trust, respect and love them by ensuring they were treated to the best the village had to offer, all to allow them to remain in the positions they held, to desperately hold on to their power, but they were always afraid. Have too much power and they would inevitably fear it. But there was nothing he could do. He was supremely talented, likely the most so ever, but he was young. People like the Hokage could best him easily as of now simply by way of pure overwhelming force. That would change in time. He would likely become the strongest, but there was still much to learn about his power, but more importantly about chakra. Naruto knew that understanding chakra, both his own and the world's, at a deeper level would allow him to use and manipulate his abilities to a degree he couldn't even fathom. And he would learn that from his Jonin-sensei. The Jonin force are the elite of the village, the poster children of Konoha. Very few make it to the Jonin rank when you consider the vast amount of people who become shinobi. To be a Jonin means to have had absolute faith placed in your abilities, the belief that if you are there, whatever task is at hand will be completed with utmost efficiency. Naruto knew that his sensei would likely be of an even higher caliber. He and Sasuke were likely to be considered VIPs within the village and so would receive a higher tier of instructor to both teach them properly but also ensure their safety. Naruto opened his eyes for the first time since closing them against Sasuke. He almost wanted to flinch as all the excess information he had been blocking was allowed to enter his brain. But he ignored the temptation and focused on the visible chakra flowing around him. He watched as his own flowed like a raging river within his tenketsu, unbelievably powerful and yet flowing along the path he dictated. He looked more intently, almost as if his eyes were zooming in. He peered deeper into his inner power and allowed his eyes to analyze and break it down for him. Yes, he could tell this was the way to better himself and his natural abilities. Understanding of his own chakra, experiencing the core of all his strength firsthand. Konoha Academy. Naruto returned to the academy the next day as had been instructed and sat down. He was just on time and so ignored Iruka-sensei's glare and reprimand. Okay, maybe he was a little late, but it's not that bad. Naruto, you're 15 minutes late. Any longer and I'd have released the results and teams before you even arrived. Okay, maybe it was a little bad. Sensei, I promise it's not my fault. The girls just wouldn't leave me alone on my way here. They kept shouting, "Come back, you're so pretty," and "Have my babies," so I had to warp here. Naruto spoke with a completely straight face. Iruka just looked at him with a dumb expression, really showing how he felt about that obvious lie. Gods, he hoped Naruto was lying. Wait. Warp. Anyway, Iruka continued, ignoring Naruto's grin and sly wink at Ino, who he had sat next to. First, I want to congratulate all of you on your performances. A majority of you here have achieved a passing grade. Those who have not, don't worry, there are many more opportunities to advance, whether you continue to study an extra year here or even try your hand at an apprenticeship under a chunin to earn a field promotion doing tasks here within the village. I'll begin handing out your results and allow you a 15-minute break outside while we prepare in here. If you passed, I'd like you to return to the room after that time, If not, you're free to head home and we'll discuss how to move forwards tomorrow. As Naruto was handed his form showing a clear and easy pass, he allowed himself a little fun in celebration. Looking up from his sheet to a corner of the room, he could easily see the chakra that was hovering around. He assumed it to be some kind of spy jutsu based on the chakra and so gave a cheeky smile and waved to it before discreetly hitting it with an unseen repulsive force. Hokage's office. The Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen, was sitting behind his desk, which was littered with pictures of students. He was decorated in his full attire befitting the leader of the village, with a white and red hat displaying his position as the fire shadow to all. In front of him stood his Jonin senseis to be. These would be the people that would fan the flames of the will of fire and support the young leaves who would eventually take his and their place in protecting the great tree. They were currently watching as the Chunin sensei Iruka began handing out the results to his students. So, any questions or complaints? The elder Kage rasped out. Hokage-sama, if I may. A young brunette with dazzling red eyes made herself known. After receiving his blessing, she spoke. Why focus so much on the Uzumaki? I understand his talent certainly, but he is of no clan or noteworthy background. His early talent will surely be overshadowed when the clan heirs mature and grow. She held nothing against him personally. She was sure it's tough to grow in such an environment and remain okay. It's totally understandable he would delude even himself in his attempt to feel important in such a wide village. But she couldn't see why he would be placed in such a way as to ensure his safety and progression to the same extent as the Uchiha heir. Many seemed to agree with the points raised, some likely for even less altruistic reasons than the first, but it still ached Hiruzen's old heart to hear people speak of Naruto in such a way. He was not as close to the boy as he would have wished. Naruto's seeming resentment of him started after the council meeting when his eyes had first been discovered to be abnormal. Naruto was smart even then. He had watched the child listen in and discover how the rulers and nobles of this village discussed ways to kill or manipulate him, in fear of the power or curse he may carry. He watched as Naruto formed a steadfast belief that they were cowards who shouted to kill a child but would not dare do it themselves. Then when his presence was known, laced their voices with honey, attempting to sway him. Naruto is placed where he is because I believe Kakashi is the best suited to teach him. There are many among you who believe Naruto's eyes to be some kind of ruse, but I assure you, as far as we can tell, they do have some chakra properties and abilities to them. Many around still appeared skeptical but would never openly defy their Kage. The room all looked into the orb on the Hokage's desk, allowing a view of the classroom, and focused on one boy in particular. But Hokage-sama, surely. The words died in her throat as they watched Naruto look at them before giving a smile and wave, clearly showing he was aware of their presence watching him, and the feed went dark. Ha 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 ha. Cough cough. Well, hopefully that display allows us to move on from this topic. Yes. Hiruzen gave a chuckle at the display. That boy and his ego would surely bring him much pain and amusement in the times to come. The room seemed to grumble in agreement to the Hokage's words, but Kakashi remained focused on his new charge. He had been given a team that broke the usual pattern of placements outside of direct requests. Instead of his team being made up of the best male and female student along with the lowest scorer, he had been allotted a team with the top 3 in the class. He wasn't surprised to have been given care of Sasuke. He was the only one left who wielded the boy's bloodline to teach him. His female student looked impressive on paper, but Kakashi knew to look underneath here. He saw the girls as she truly was, and despite her promise in a few of the more delicate fields, he wasn't impressed. No, he assumed he was given charge of Haruno Sakura in an attempt to steer her in the right direction mentally. His last student though was his current focus, Uzumaki Naruto. His sensei would surely be proud of his boy, though maybe he'd be forgiven if he beat some humility into the child, he thought with a gentle smile hidden beneath his mask. Academy. Having returned from their break, the students who had passed were once more sat within the classroom. They had walked in to find Iruka standing ready to tell them the news that would determine their lives for years to come. Once more I want to say how proud I am of this class. I know you will become fantastic shinobi. Who knows, we may have a future Hokage graduating with us today. Iruka spoke with a genuine voice, truly showing how much he cared for these kids he taught. Okay, moving on to our team selections. He began to announce each team of 3 and the sensei they had been allocated. Okay, in Team 7 is Uchiha Sasuke, Haruno Sakura and Uzumaki Naruto. Your Jonin sensei is Hitaki Kakashi. The newly announced team looked among each other and had varied reactions between them. Yes SSS. No, were the simultaneous shouts from Sakura and Ino. Each girl having wanted to be placed with the object of their shared affection Sasuke. True love prevails piggy ahahaha. Sakura was beyond happy to be with Sasuke. Naruto's place in the team was entirely irrelevant to her. Ino grumbled even further when she heard her placement with Choji and Shikamaru. She was even a little disappointed not to be placed with her fellow blonde. Naruto was at least fun and entertaining, unlike fatty and lazy, as she had so nicely named her two childhood friends. Sasuke bore a small grin for a second at being placed with his rival and friend, not that he'd admit such a thing to anyone. He was happy to be placed with someone he could continue to push himself against, someone he learned from, and even someone whom he thought understood him a little. Sakura being on the team was a non-factor. He would ignore her as he always had. Well, try to anyway. In smaller numbers he'd likely have to interact with her sometimes. I hope this Kakashi is powerful. I need to know more. I need to be better. Naruto was slightly more animated than his broody teammate, but less so than his other seriously loud one. Ah well, I'll just have to make friends with our sensei. Wouldn't want to disturb the lovebirds and be stuck third wheeling. Naruto said to himself aloud and gave a sigh as he rested his head on his palm. He stuck his tongue out at Ino, who had peeked over at him when she heard lovebirds. She quickly spun around after giving him the finger, which he laughed at. 3 hours later and the once bustling classroom was empty, everyone having left with their new sensei to begin their new lives as shinobi of Konoha. Well, almost everyone. Team 7 remained sat in their seats awaiting the arrival of this Kakashi guy who would be their sensei. What is taking him so long? This is ridiculous. Sakura was not happy. She had begun the wait, overjoyed at being placed with her beloved. She had fallen into fantasy after fantasy revolving around her dark prince. Yet when she had mustered up the courage to ask him out after waiting an hour, she was met with a reply from an extremely annoyed Sasuke. She had been shot down. All because this Kakashi was late, and it was annoying Sasuke. She would never forgive him. Ah, sorry about the wait, guys. A black cat crossed my path and I had to take the long way round before I accidentally ran into an old lady crossing the road, so I helped her to her home. A new figure spoke standing in the doorway. He was tall with gray hair spiked up to one side and most of his face covered by both a mask and headband slanted down to cover his left eye. But Sakura was so put off by the ridiculous excuse she didn't even realize who this man was until he introduced himself. I'm Kakashi. Meet me upstairs on the roof so we can catch up. And with that he disappeared. Sakura watched Sasuke stand and ready himself to leave before both looked over at their remaining teammate. Sprawled out over the desk, Naruto was sound asleep. Having got bored of being the most annoying person in the world after a few minutes of waiting for Kakashi, their teammate had decided to just sleep. Deciding to abandon him to whatever fate awaited, the dumbass Sakura and Sasuke made their way to the roof, with Sakura attempting to make conversation the whole way. When they arrived, Sakura was surprised to see Naruto sitting on a step in front of the gray-haired guy, once again resting his eyes if his posture was anything to go by. Wah, how did he get here? Sakura asked, looking from Naruto to Sasuke, then their new sensei, attempting to piece together how the boy she had just seen asleep downstairs was apparently already here. Well, he appeared just after I did. If I didn't know any better, I'd assume he was pretending to sleep and teleported up here or something. Sakura thought that was ridiculous. Naruto may be talented, even she could admit that, but he was still an idiot and defiantly wasn't capable of that. She and Sasuke approached the step their fellow student had taken purchase on and sat with him awaiting their sensei's instruction. Kakashi had a long look at the children before him. They each would have their difficulties in teaching them. Sasuke was a complex boy who needed both a firm hand to keep his ego and desire in line, but also a comforting one who could bring down the walls he'd constructed after the massacre and help bring him back into truly living again, rather than single-mindedly idly pursuing power to kill his only remaining family. Sakura was, for lack of a better term, a fangirl. She had talent. She was smart. Not fight smart but book smart, that would lend itself well to areas of study like medicine or even seals to an extent. Her small reserves of chakra also meant that she naturally had great control over it. He could build up her reserves to a respectable level while never forcing her to lose control. But the issue was she would never survive nor choose to partake in such tiresome and unflattering training. She was solely interested in Sasuke and would be happy to remain as she was and watch him grow and protect her. Naruto was likely the hardest though. He was the most talented person Kakashi had ever seen, and the only reason he hadn't bested his, Minato, or Itachi's record for early graduation was that it had been prohibited, for fear of both losing the power he offered the village and losing their control of his power as he grew beyond them. If the way Naruto arrived in front of him was any indication, then the boy had more to show than he had been letting on in the academy, which made sense. He was powerful enough to dominate all his year just by throwing around punches. There was no need to seriously go at it and risk injuring someone. But teaching someone like Naruto posed its own issues. What do you try show him? It's likely that he would want to focus on whatever benefit his eyes give him in combat, and any abilities or techniques they bestow onto him. But with Naruto being so secretive of them and withholding information, beyond what he assumed was a passive ability to see chakra, Kakashi could hardly help in that field. Anyway, the kids were looking at him like some kind of crazy person now after he just stared at them without speaking, so it's time to get this new chapter in their lives started. Yo, I'm Hatake Kakashi, I'll be your Jonin sensei. Well, assuming you pass, that is, Kakashi spoke with an eye smile that didn't comfort his students at all. Pass, all three thought while looking at the man who claimed to be their teacher. Oh yeah, Kakashi would enjoy this.